Hey guys, what we're going to be doing in this lesson is looking at collecting data and the ways that we can do it, and most importantly, we're going to define some important terms. The first thing we're going to look at is a primary source versus a secondary source. Primary source is first hand information. So this is information that you have personally collected. For example, conducting an interview. A secondary source is information that has come from somebody else. For example, a textbook. Textbook. Okay, and we mentioned this briefly in our first lesson, the different ways we can collect data. The first is a census. This is where data is collected from everyone. You might be familiar with the censuses that come out every few years. To every house in Australia, you have to fill out a bunch of information about the people that live in the house. It's called a census because it goes to everybody. It goes to everyone in the country to collect their information for the government. A sample, though, is slightly different. A sample is a much smaller group. You're not trying to get everyone, you're specifically choosing a smaller group to make it a bit easier for you to work with. There are some different types of samples. Random sample, as the name suggests, is just people chosen randomly. So there are 8 of us in our class, I think, 9 of us in our class. If I chose 3 people at random to ask what you thought of how our maths is going, that would be a random sample. A stratified sample is where you do your best to make the sample represent exactly the entire population. So, for example, let's say across year 12 there's a 60-40 split girls, boys. If I was going to collect data from a stratified sample of our year 12 class, I would take 10 students and 6 of them would be girls and 4 of them would be boys, because out of the whole group, 60% are girls, 40% are boys. So I've chosen my sample to try and, as close as possible, resemble the total population. Population. And a stratified sample is, a systematic sample is following a system, as the name suggests. So what I mean by that is, let's use the example of the year 12 class again. A way to get a systematic sample of the people in year 12 is you would line everyone up alphabetically and take every 5th person, for example. You have a system for choosing your people, so your choice isn't random, but you haven't really put any thought into making your sample match the population. You've just got a system for choosing your people, so and you follow that system. Follow a rule, if you like. choose people. For example, choose every fifth person. Let's look at an example here of identifying the different sample types. There's a retirement village here that has 63 residents. 42 of them are women, 21 of them are men. If we took a sample of every 7th resident, that would be systematic. We have a rule in place that we're choosing every 7th person, and we're following that rule. That's a systematic sample. 6 of the women and 3 of the men. The ratio of women to men is roughly 2 to 1, and this ratio here is roughly 2 to 1. So that is a stratified sample, because they've tried to make this sample representative of the entire group. 9 names picked from a hat containing the names of all the residents. That one is obviously random. At this point, I'd like you to pause the video and try and do the last 3 on your own. When you unpause, I'll show you what the answers are. Sorry, last 2, that is. So D, the residents are sorted in alphabetical order and every 9th resident is selected. Again, that's a systematic sample. Because there's a rule and the rule is being followed. And in the last one, residents are divided into 4 age groups and 2 residents are selected from each group. This seems a bit like a systematic example because they've established a rule and they've followed it. But I think this one is actually a stratified example because they've tried to get a spread of all the ages to make their sample representative of the whole group. That's the important difference with the stratified example, is that some effort is made to make the sample look like the whole group. So underneath this video, in the lesson on iLearn, there will be a document attached that has some questions from the Year 11 textbook for you to complete. I'd like you to do question 1 to 5 of those. Thanks, everyone.